exploring today. So the art world can feel like an exclusive and mysterious realm reserved for only the ultra wealthy, but it doesn't have to be. In this presentation, two art advisors will pull back the curtain on how the industry actually works, walking attendees through galleries, auction houses, and art fairs that make up this dynamic marketplace. Drawing on their hands-on experience, guiding clients through every stage of the process, they offer a step-by-step look at how art advisors help buyers and sellers navigate transactions with confidence and clarity. So for our speakers today, Sarah Greenberg Morse is an art estate advisor specializing in 20th century post-war painting, sculpture, and photography. Her prior experience includes founding two galleries in Soho in the 1980s and 90s, followed by a career in visual journalism at the Wall Street Journal. Sarah is the daughter of the art critic Clement Greenberg and holds a BA in art history from Vassar College and an MBA from NYU's Stern School of Business. And Edie Meyer has worked in the art business in both London and New York and taps into her extensive network of contacts to find the best possible solutions for her clients. She is on the board of directors of Art Table, the National Association of Professional Women in the Visual Arts, and serves on the Directors Advisory Council for the Lehigh University Art Galleries. Edie received a BA from Lehigh University and an MBA from Fordham University. And with that, I'm going to pass the reins off to our speakers and let them dive into the world of art advising. I'm very excited for today's topic. And, as I've shared with Edie and Sarah, I know very little to next to nothing about this world. So it's going to be very educational for me, as I hope it is for all of you as well. So Edie, Sarah, why don't you take us away and pull back that curtain for us?
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for the introduction and the opportunity to talk with Lehigh alums today. I'll start off by speaking a bit about the building a collection, and Sarah will follow up by explaining the process of deaccessioning. So some people know what they're looking for in building a collection, and others are might be newer to collecting. They really can use the help of a good art advisor who can help them even develop their own tastes. So, for instance, I was working with a gentleman who recently who is a watch collector and had just bought a second home and wanted to buy art for it. He unfortunately had been intimidated to visit galleries and also thought he didn't really know what he liked as far as art went. After having a chat with him, we talked about a bit more about whether he liked figurative or abstract paintings, photography, color, black and white, and just sort of the basic ideas of what he might be interested in. And then we started working together by me sending him just simple documents with images and information about different artists I thought could be interesting to him, and also within his budget. We then visited some galleries and art fairs, which are really a great way, particularly art fairs, to see a number of different artists efficiently and get a sense of what's out there that you might be interested in, and connect with a number of different galleries from around the world, oftentimes. After several rounds of looking at art at galleries and art fairs and sending him documents where he would just simply say yay or nay on different artists that I presented to him. We started to really get an idea of pieces that he was very interested in, and we would go to the galleries and take a look at them in person. And then I worked to negotiate the prices with the galleries and organize shipping. Finally, the client and I worked together to choose frames and then also to hang the art in his home. And really, all of this was done within a reasonable budget. I think one thing is that a lot of people think that they can't afford original art, and really, that's not true. It's, there's a lot of great art available that's not, doesn't cost a fortune. And in that same vein, really anybody can become a collector. Um, and your desire can be cultivated in many ways. I also believe that it's important to support artists. And if you buy art, then they can make more art. And it's just important to love what you're buying. There can be an element of investing in art, but we always say the most important thing is to really love what you're buying because there's no guarantee on investment. Um, we also look at it as helping clients navigate art galleries and fairs. And we can sometimes even provide access to artist studios so our clients can hear directly from the artists and um, understand their processes, which is always a lot of fun. I think a lot of people don't realize that artists oftentimes do welcome individuals into their studios. Um, we also can arrange, as I mentioned, gallery and art fair tours. Um, and I think also a lot of people with the news recently about the Pollock selling for 181 million. I think a lot of people are scared away from auction houses. And actually, there quite often are good deals to be had via auction houses. And that's just, you need to sort of know where to look, and we can help with that as well. Um, Finally, we can help with collection management. So, as I mentioned, installation, framing, but also insurance, conservation, transportation, and storage. And with that brief overview, I will turn you over to Sarah, who will talk more about the deaccessioning process.
All right. Thank you, Edie. And thank you, Bryce, for organizing this event. It's a pleasure to be here. And the other half of the story that Edie just told is how to approach your collection when the time comes for various reasons. The time comes that you need to downsize, deaccession, sell the entire thing. That often will happen if you're moving or just a change of life, if you'd like to sell a piece of art in order to buy some new things. And the largest challenge of these situations is when a family is faced with an estate situation. If the older generation has passed away, and you've probably been reading about the shifting demographics and the great wealth transfer. Well, much of that transfer is made up of art and other collectible items. And so having an advisor on board as part of an estate team or just as part of your team, if you're just moving, can be very valuable. And to make sure that that every item is assessed properly for its value, every item is taken care of in the proper way, and that your decision-making process toward whatever your goal is done in an educated and guided way. And so Edie and I work with families. We begin with a consultation just to understand the situation, help families set goals, understand the nature of assets, make sure that we're all working on the same timeline. If it is an estate situation, maybe it's a home that needs to be emptied out. And so then we're dealing with a whole range of items. And Edie and I definitely pride ourselves on what we call our Warhol to Wedgwood approach. So we're not just swanning in to manage the most expensive and valuable items, but we will help families with everything from their Warhols through the Wedgwoods all the way through to helping with a final clean out of a home. We're not afraid to roll up our sleeves and handle the entire situation. And in that way, we can become a valuable part of the estate team if that is the situation, working with estate lawyers and tax accountants when making decisions about what to do with individual items. Generally, especially in an estate situation, you're dealing with a large number of items. And so Edie and I will bring in we have an extensive network of dealers from the highest end. Well, we do have some Warhols, of course, then we're calling Sotheby's and Christie's, but there's an entire, just as there is, Edie mentioned on the buying end, there's an entire range of lower tiered dealers that work with lower valued items. And these would be the places that handle the antique furniture, the Wedgwood china dishes, the all those kinds of items are not going to be going to Sotheby's or Christie's, but there are an array of auction houses mostly that will handle large volume of items. And so Edie and I have a large network of those people, including also a network of appraisers that will help bring estimates of values to our clients. We don't pretend to know everything, and so that is part of our Rolodex of experts. The other way that items are often let go of in an art collection is via donations, charitable art donations. And those can be very rewarding when you feel you're giving a piece of art to an institution that very much needs, filling a gap in their collection. It can also be a very complicated process because museums across America are chock full of art and are a little bit less open to accepting things than they were years ago. So we can help find other institutions, there are hospitals and schools and other places that might make for an equally rewarding donation. And another part of the work that we do when it comes to deaccessioning is we can play art detective, and this is can be quite fun. And an anecdote that I have from a client that I worked with a couple of years ago it was the nephew of a man who had died recently, leaving an apartment filled with a folk art collection. That's what I was brought in to manage. And we all understood there's not an enormous value in these pieces that he had picked up through his lifetime at yard sales throughout Bucks County, but there was some value, and so I worked to find the right dealer to come in, and we brought in a couple of more than a couple, a few different dealers so that we could have competing proposals and negotiate value that way for my client. But in the end, what was also there was large bookshelves filled with books of varying value. And I brought in a couple of different book dealers to look through the books. And one of them found tucked in among a range of valued books was some archival material relating to my client's uncle's career as an editor and journalist at Newsweek magazine, covering the civil rights era. And there were a lot of original documents, including letters from Martin Luther King and Malcolm X to my client's uncle. And so, with my help, we found the yet another area of dealers that specialize in archival material. And this was specifically an American archival material, 20th century. And they were thrilled to buy this material for a price that ended up being 4 times the value of the collection of the folk art that was in the apartment. So that was, just sort of a double whammy of bringing monetary value to my client, but also the legacy of his uncle then being recognized and these materials not being thrown away by accident and nor sold unknowingly to a book collector and not knowing the value that we were letting go of. So that ends my spiel, but happy to take questions. And yeah, continue on that way.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Edie, for that overview. I really hope that we can have a robust dialogue with our audience today. So it looks like we have some folks in the audience who have a background in the work that you guys that's similar to the work that you guys do. Susan had submitted a comment, so she has a BA in art history from Lehigh and a master's in material culture from Penn. She was a specialist at Sotheby's in antique silver and estate jewelry for years, and then on staff later as a consultant, spending 50 years in the business as an international dealer, working with all the major New York designers in the 80s through the 2000s, accessorizing client homes. And thank you, Susan, for offering to help, with some of the questions. I think for someone with your experience, I think having some generalist questions that maybe you could share that the layman person may not know to ask would be always helpful. And then Ross also wanted to know, so for Edie and Sarah, are there any contemporary American artists you currently are following and considered to be up and coming luminaries?
Okay. Uh, Edie, do you want to? I've got a couple of names that I've been working of artist names that I've been working with recently that I'm happy to throw out there, but I Edie might as well. I recently was working with a collector who bought, very modest, just buying works to fill their home here in New York City, but two very different artists that we discovered together, actually. One was Twee Hoffmaster, and I'll get his name into the chat, who works with the floral motif, but large scale and going abstract. And they're very powerful paintings that we showed up at the show the day after it opened. And my collectors just jumped at one of the larger paintings. And luckily they did because the show sold out. And so certainly that is a good sign that that artist is going somewhere. And then another artist who's a more recent discovery for me is Kate Spencer Stewart, who is LA based and is also working in an abstracted landscape area, but much more abstracted. And so they're lovely large canvases where there's great depth in the abstraction, and where if you study it hard enough, you can feel the idea of a landscape, but it's a little bit of a tougher, it takes a while to get there. So those are two artists on my brain at the moment.
Yeah, and I would say I recently bought a piece for a client from an artist named Maureen Dougherty, and she's really interesting because she used to work and she used to paint abstract paintings, and now she's got moved to figurative, and she's been working on this quite funny, strange, wonderful series of collectors, and they're made up collectors. So the one I bought was a woman in front of her owl collection, her stuffed owl collection. And she has a show right now in upstate New York, and I apologize, I can't remember the name of the gallery. But I think she's really great. And she's, it's interesting to note she's not a young artist, but oftentimes you can find artists who've been working for years, particularly women or people of color, who just were sort of overlooked and or who did really well for a while and then their popularity fell off for whatever reason, and then they sort of come back on the market strong in a strong way. So um, that's just an interesting thing to note. Another very young artist that I like a lot is called Dana Piazza, and
Mhm.
he does these abstract shapes that he draws. They look like they're prints, but he actually hand draws every single line. And he's really kind of been up and coming. And I've seen him particularly at a lot of art fairs and getting more and more attention. Um, but I think galleries are interesting because they there are a lot of, I would say, emerging art galleries, so galleries that specialize in emerging art. Here in New York City, a lot of the galleries on the Lower East Side would be probably
Mhm.
considered, and actually some in Chelsea that are in the buildings that have a lot of galleries in them.
Mhm.
And I think they're great because they kind of are experts in finding these up and coming artists. And so they're also good resources.
Wonderful. So, kind of as somebody who is the uneducated person on the presentation, so you guys have mentioned kind of a variety of different kind of, I would say, niches or specialties. So obviously, I think when a lot of people think of art collections, they think of paintings or sculptures. But Sarah, you brought up that books and archival material can be very valuable collection pieces also. So thinking into your guys's experience, how many different, I guess, niches or specialties would you say that make up the majority of the work that you do? I think painting is probably an obvious one, but maybe outside of that, what are some other, significant collections that you've worked with that are kind of outside of that kind of specialty?
Well, I'll jump in with that. I'll say that certainly on the buying side, working with collectors who are buying, yes,
Mhm.
paintings are the top priority. They're the easiest to purchase, easiest to install and live with. And
Mhm.
but I will say that when I'm working with estate collections and we're deaccessioning situations, books are the number one and then number one thing. And again,
Mhm.
that's a generational thing. People my parents' age or even slightly younger, so born in the beginning of the 20th century, the books were, it was these were, and some this is the stuff of life. And if you were a thinking person who was also collecting art, you would have books about art, your literature books. And so that has been a largest challenge, but also a recognition that there are pockets of value there and pockets of interest in just even the newest generation is becoming interested in the analog world, and these items are holding value again. But there are all kinds of funny things that we fall into with, certainly new to me, the value that can be held in rare china sets or collectible. There's always, jewelry is a huge thing. There's nothing new there, but we have to behave as generalists a lot of the time, and but also be very, very conscious of what we don't know and when it's time to bring in an expert. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean the collectibles market has really been booming.
Yeah.
We work a lot with auction houses like Heritage,
Mm, right.
which, I've worked on selling a coin collection that was actually through Bonhams. And I mean there you can even find value in things like old baseball cards, action figures, there is a lot of emphasis put on grading of these collectibles. So they do need to be in good condition in order to be to have real value. But yeah, there are so many different silver. I've sold old silver. So there's value in a lot of different items that sometimes get overlooked.
Yeah, I would say the one piece that I have to contribute to this, as you were talking about collectibles, Edie, is things like Pokemon cards, which when I
Yeah.
was a kid were like I was hugely obsessed with Pokemon cards as a kid, and every 10-year-old's like, oh, this is going to be worth $1 million one day. Little did they know that there are
Right.
actual Pokemon cards with cartoon characters on them that are worth tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, much to what you were
Yeah.
saying, Edie, about the grading of and the rarity of those particular items.
Yes.
All right.
So,
All right. So we'll go back to the chat for some questions. This is an interesting one from Raymond. So what is the rough idea of cost percentage for service in estate scenario? So if you're working with an estate, what is I guess what is the pricing structure like? How does payment work? And in different scenarios with estates versus with individual clients, like what does that look like?
I'll jump into that one. I'm sure Edie will add, but generally. if the scenario is a household full of goods, including an art collection on down, and the goal is to empty the house, the payment structure for the advisors will be a mix of payment for our time, because that's a time-consuming process. The Warhol Wedgwood, the soup to nuts, that's a time-consuming process. But and with a small finder's fee type commission that we will receive from the dealers that we're working with. And these are dealers giving us maybe 2 to 3% of sales price that comes out of the dealer's revenue, does not come out of our client's revenue. So the in an estate situation, I would say that the bulk of our payment is coming from being paid for our time. The When working with clients who are buying art, it's very different. It's a pretty strict structure where 10% on the purchase price is what we will take from our clients. So if you're buying, and that will be balanced out by us negotiating a discount off the retail price from the gallery. So if the painting is $10,000, the gallery is offering $1,000 discount, then we are basically being paid that 10%, but always from our client. And so that there's never any conflict of interest, so that we're not double dipping in any scenario.
Yeah, and oftentimes with we can negotiate a bigger discount than our
Yes.
fee even. So I think that's the other thing people don't realize, that actually it is not expensive to work with an art advisor.
Right.
Wonderful. So let's see. So we did have some questions around art fairs with multiple artists in the tri-state area. Outside of the New York City proper and kind of that immediate region that you guys have referenced, what are some other areas maybe that you guys are engaging with regularly to find artists or work with potential clients?
Yeah.
And is it primarily in the tri-state area? So New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, like how wide is the market beyond just, New York City proper?
I'll take this one. I actually used to work for an international art fair with the galleries. Um, I mean, really, the best ones are in New York City, in the spring and the fall. And I see in the chat somebody mentioned TFAF, Freeze, the Armory Show. Those are the bigger one, the Winter Antique Show. But there are also a lot of really great art fairs that are around these bigger shows, that are much more reasonable pricing, and they're representing galleries with emerging artists and emerging galleries. And those would be there's a great one with African art that's called 154. There's oh, sorry, I'm blanking on the
I'm
names.
gonna throw in Nada, the
Nada,
new
yep,
art dealers. That's a great fair that
yep.
happens in New York around the same
Future
time.
Fair is another one.
Right. And there's
Um,
the Outsider Art Fair. That's a
yep,
whole area of art that is becoming more and more popular, getting more valuable in certain respects, but also there are great deals to be found. Yeah.
yep.
Wonderful. This is a great question that just came in from Jim. So I can definitely see the value of working with an art advisor. I'm currently living in the Midwest. So my question is, how do you recommend finding a reputable and appropriate to the art that that individual owns advisor in a particular region of the country? So that's a great question. How does one go about vetting, searching, identifying an art dealer that is, going to be a good fit for that particular client situation?
Well, there is the art advisor. Uh, I'm forgetting what the acronym stands for, but there's an art advisory organization that I'll put into the chat after when I have a second to Google it. It's also a matter of you could contact us and we could try to find, through our network of people that we know, and certainly network of galleries that we know across the country, help find the right advisor who is more local. Galleries can often be a good source. And there's also the Art Dealers Association of America, that is the art gallery organization that can be good for vetting all kinds of professionals in your area. But yeah, Edie and I are certainly happy to help find the right person.
Right, wonderful. Yeah, Sarah, prior to starting the presentation, you mentioned about wanting to share contact information with the audience for those that may want to reach out to you. So if you want to do that
Yes,
and drop that in the chat, that would be wonderful.
sure. And Edie will throw her email in as well.
All right. Let's see. So we also got a question from let's see, where is it? Raymond, specifically about Native American collections, jewelry, artwork, pottery. And I think that kind of brings into maybe a larger question of like how often are there dynamics within certain areas of the industry that you don't wouldn't necessarily navigate in another area? So like for me, for example, thinking about the Native American piece of it, is there obviously cultural, not necessarily conflicts, but like cultural connotations to be aware of, or, kind of other inner workings of particular niches.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm
Yeah.
necessarily phrasing that correctly, but I'm hoping you guys can navigate
The
that.
collecting in that area is absolutely possible. Edie and I both have a friend, Vida, who actually is a collector almost exclusively of Native American and Native Canadian art. And the key there is finding the right dealers, that you're not, that's where it's more important than ever in that area, so that you're buying works that have been cleared through, that are genuinely for sale, and that the artist or the artist's family will be receiving proceeds, and that they're not in any way things that have been gotten in a way that's not legal these days. It becomes more complicated, but also there are the right experts that we're happy to connect people with, who handle, if you're in an estate situation and your grandfather many generations ago collected a whole bunch of native art and was living in Santa Fe and blah blah blah, reselling those items is going to be a different story than what your grandfather experienced. And so you want to make sure that you're going through the right channels and following the right path to selling those items.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. So we have about 10 minutes or so left in the presentation, everyone. So we definitely still got time for more questions. I've got some in my back pocket that I'll start digging into. So this is a kind of a different aspect. I don't know if we've really touched on this much at all, but kind of the collection management and the logistics piece of it. So on the operational side of art management, what actually goes into the back end that the public doesn't really see. So transportation, installation, security, what in your guys' experience, like what does that process look like? And again, different clients, different situations, everyone's going to have a unique circumstance, but any details that you guys can share about that process and what that might look like.
Yeah, Edie, do you want to?
Sure. And I apologize. There's, of course, drilling behind me. Perfect timing. So I hope everybody can hear me. What I would recommend for what we call art logistics is going to a good specialist in art logistics. There are companies that we work with on a regular basis who this is their specialty, and it depends what you're trying to store or ship, and they can really help with all different types of art, and all the logistics around art.
Yeah, generally the companies that are working with transportation often offer storage options as well. So that's a good situation. And the whole other area that gets more specialized is conservation, and making sure that you're taking care of the works that maybe end, hanging on the wall for over 10 years, and suddenly you realize, well, it is time to get, the cigarette smoke and the, barbecue kind of situation off of the surface of these paintings. And so then that really, again, that's a whole other network that advisors do bring to the table of knowing the right conservators for the right works of art in need. Um, and and for collectors who are collecting beyond, pushing the envelope, and so to speak, and beyond what their walls can hold, storage becomes a very important part of that collection management. And there are, I mean, as in anything else, there's a whole range of money you could spend on that. And generally, the most expensive places can be worth it depending on your needs, because they will handle kind of a seamless, transportation situation. And where if you're swapping out artworks, and they handle insurance across all of those scenarios of moving the art. Insurance is another thing that, once your collection starts achieving a certain value, you do need to consider insuring it, and really you should. And there's the blanket coverage, and then once certain items are above a certain value, then insurance companies will need an individualized list of the art and the value and that will involve insurance appraisals to get that value on your insurance listing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
So with that, are there specific companies that do that solely in the space of art collections? Because I'm thinking like, does like Allstate or State Farm offer insurance policies for art collections, or are there specialized companies that work in that space?
That's a good question. I don't have the answer for Allstate or the other, general place, but the place that I work with most often and that I use for my own collection is Chubb,
Mhm.
and that they've been around since my parents were alive, and so they've been around for a long time, and but I would imagine that all the big
Or large
national
insurance
insurance.
companies probably have
Yeah.
some kind of offering for that.
Yeah,
Sure.
I actually have Geico.
Oh,
Mhm.
They also offer insurance for, I don't have a hugely valuable art collection. So for somebody who has a more, you know, a mid-range art collection, that just any pretty much I think any insurance company will have some kind of art insurance available.
Wonderful. And then Sarah, you mentioned that once the value of a collection reaches kind of a certain threshold, that there should be a serious consideration for insurance. Like, is that $50,000, $100,000, $1 million? And obviously that number can be subjective to
yeah,
each individual,
right.
but
I mean, and this is just a personal opinion that I, offer professionally, but I couch it as, but if you've got a group of art that you've paid recently 50,000 or above, yes, you should be looking at insurance. Yeah. And the insurance companies, though, really only need those items separated out if any one piece is above a certain value. And I'm not sure that value changes all the time, but that's where it gets more complicated. Yeah.
Edie, anything to add there or no?
No, I think just that as I mentioned, for lower priced pieces, you can oftentimes get insurance through a regular insurance company. And it's something you can also ask an insurance broker about. They should have knowledge of that as well. Or, of course, your art advisor.
Absolutely. Okay, let's see. So we've got a few minutes left. I'm going to do maybe one or two more questions. I can't remember if it was Sarah or Edie talking about the great kind of wealth transfer and working potentially with a clientele and a demographic that's maybe shifting to a younger demographic. So how have conversations or approaches with younger clients or maybe clients that are bringing on an estate from an older family member, how are conversations with those clients perhaps different or more unique than those who are older and more educated and helped build those collections? Do they have certain preferences of, types of art, keeping, deessentioning, kind of what does that look like when working with a new demographic?
That can be, it's unique to each situation. There are some children of collectors who are very knowledgeable and very attached to a lot of what their parents collected. And so that can be, that's wonderful. And the knowledge that they bring and their investment in all of it, emotional investment is wonderful to see. But then, of course, it provides a whole new set of difficulties because brother and sister want they love the same painting that's been hanging over the family couch for decades. And so those are hard conversations where, myself and certainly the estate lawyer is then recognizing that things will need to be sold because the value needs to be split. Then there are the kids who are like, whatevs, I'm into my Pokemon stuff, but I really don't, right? I do not care about the Pollock that's hanging over the couch. And we're like, well, you'll need to care about it in these ways. And that's why we're here to make sure that care is taken for these items. And it's a different kind of conversation. So it's the entire spectrum of the new generation, yeah, presents the entire spectrum of interest in the art. And it depends on the collection too. I mean, obviously everybody's going to be interested in the $181 million Pollock over the couch or what, but like dad's obsession with 18th century drawings of dogs, from England. So then it's a matter of just you got to find the right dealer who will bring the value for that. But yeah.
Absolutely. So to kind of wrap things up with kind of our final question for the day. So kind of looking ahead over the next maybe 5 to 10 years or so, what is exciting to you guys about the future of the industry, and maybe something challenging that you're foreseeing, as, art advising grows and evolves and the industry changes, especially with the advent of technology and AI, kind of 5 to 10 years out, what are you guys thinking about within the industry?
Edie, do you want to take
Yeah, I
it?
guess I'll start on that. I mean, for me, it's really bringing in new collectors and getting people excited about buying original art and the art business becoming more transparent as far as pricing, which, by the way, if it's a law that if you go into a gallery and ask for a price list, they need to give you one. So, I just think the more people who buy art and support the business is great. I do think digital art is interesting, and that's not necessarily NFTs. There are different, kinds of digital art that's been around for a long time. I think video is interesting. And of course, photography and the different ways that photography can be manipulated. Um, so, what, Sarah, do you have thoughts on that as well?
Um, yeah, I mean, I certainly the sort of on the big picture, I would say, the art market's been through some tough times the last few. I mean, nobody's crying for it, of course, but the last couple of years have been the art market has slowed down a lot. And I think that, as in any other market, has been good for the art world and super hot trends, the ultra contemporary artists or every you know, every estate of every overlooked artist is now, not being valued as highly as it had been. There was a phase where every gallery was discovering an overlooked artist from the 20th century. And things have calmed down. But we are left with, as Edie mentions, an opener art world. There is more transparency, there's more demands, but the new generation of collectors are not cowed by the system and feel more a certain interest in continuing to break down the walls and asking for price lists. And I think I think that's where we're headed, just continued openness and transparency and bringing in the new generation in all different ways. Yeah.
Yeah. So more openness, more transparency, and more education, I would say, for the client and for the buyer for sure.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
Wonderful. So with that, we are at time. So really great, deep gratitude for Edie and Sarah in sharing their expertise with us today in an area, as I said, I know very little about, but I certainly feel like I know at least a little bit more now when, I walk into a gallery and my wife's like, I would like that on the wall. Ask for the price list first.
Yeah, exactly.
So with that, everyone, I did share Sarah and Edie's contact information in the chat. So if you're interested in connecting with them, either to find an art advisor or maybe to work with one of them, if you have your own collections, then please feel free to reach out to them. If there are any other additional questions after the fact, please feel free to reach out to me. And I'm happy to put you into contact with them. And with that, we will wrap things up from there. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of your week and the rest of your day. And we will be back soon with another Mountain Talk. So thank you, everyone,
Thank
and
you.
enjoy the
Thank
rest of your
you
day.
for everyone who
Thanks.
came.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.